Let's get ready to count it down. All right, roll. Okay, so this is the newly named Educational Programs and Services Committee. It is May 19th, 2022. It is a minute after 6 o'clock or 2. And I am Mike Elliott. I am your host. I am joined by school board members Emily McCormick, JP Prego, and Dana Hipser. Ex officio Judy McGinnis is here, as is Amy Coyle, Carol Giblin, Sarah. There you go, Sarah, and Jim is here too. He's our technology guy. No Farina or Roche.
No.
I did not get an official notice that they would. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I know. It was a joke. I've literally been on the phone with like claims calls all day long. So I got off the phone, I walked here we are. So I might be a little punchy. Okay, approval of the 21st of April's curriculum and instruction minutes. Do I have a motion?
I will motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the opposed approval of the minutes from the curriculum instruction? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next up on the agenda is the approval of the 21st of April's Special Education and Pupil Service minutes.
Do I have a motion?
Okay, do I have a second?
I don't see those minutes, are they just not in here?
I think there's a separate one.
Yeah,
Oh, is
You
it
have-
separate? It's fine if they're not in what was attached.
I
to
can
this.
give you a
Yeah.
copy right now.
Yeah, no, it's
I
totally.
know I printed one. They're in.
I can second the motion. Oh.
Yeah, they're in here.
Oh.
But I will share.
There's a
with you.
link on it in the
Yeah.
agenda.
Oh,
So
I
it
can
goes,
make another copy.
that's
Second.
Second, good deal.
Second. All right.
I'm sure they're compelling and very.
They're very compelling.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of good stuff. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, next up, now we get to the good stuff. All right, special education plan. Are you ready? Okay, all right. Areas of improvement and planning, indicators 2 and 5. What are indicators 2 and 5?
So the special ed report card is something that comes out annual. I call it the report card because it really is. Indicators are all different areas that we look at in special ed. So this is actually from like 1920. So every year they come out in
1920?
May.
Yeah.
From the year 2019, 2020. So just as
Wow, that's way back.
Well, it's actually really not old, because I'll tell you, from the school year 2020 to 2021 comes out in May of 22. So you get it basically a full year later. So over the 21-22 school year, we won't see our, a review of everything until next May of 23.
Okay.
And so we literally, I would tell you, yesterday, the day before, we did just get down, and I think I mentioned it really briefly, we'll be getting our report card in the month of May. So they did just share it with us. So every year, I think it's a really friendly document, how this looks, and it goes through all of the indicators. So,
I've seen that before.
yeah, and so indicators go up. Indicator 1, for example, is graduation rates. Indicator 2 is dropout rates. Off the top of my head, indicator 5 is least restrictive environment, one of the areas we'll talk about. Indicator 8 is like initial evaluation. So there's a lot of different areas, and then they take snapshots, they take numbers. For example, initial evaluations. A district is typically only every so many years. They'll come and they'll look at so many districts throughout the state. The expectation for that indicator is that districts are 100%, meaning every initial evaluation, it's compliance. So there's a timeline when you do an evaluation, an initial or a reevaluation, you get 60 days from typically the time the signature from the parent or approval from a permission comes back. Compliance with an initial evaluation, which is the first. So if a student qualifies It is having the report done, completed within the 60-day timeline. And I agree, it should be 100%, and that's that expectation. There's also, with transition, 2 other indicators. We talk about post-school outcomes. There's indicator 13 and 14 that deal with those areas. So indicator 13 is, students that are graduating. If you are expected during that year, so many districts per year they'll look at, automatically the following year, it's 1 year out. So what that means is our special ed students that graduated, a year out from that, we're contacting them. So between the administrators and the high school case managers, we're following up. It's sort of like an interview, going over the phone. Where is that student a year later? It's really sort of looking at the transition goals while they were here. So there's a number of different indicators,
Okay.
and then they report back to us through, when we submit, through the PIMS coordinator, who's Amy Hartzell, they will submit, we submit the data, and then annually it'll come back to us. So what happened, and so we did just get it this week.
Okay.
So we have about a week to really go through it to make sure that our information, our data agrees with that data. Assuming it does, I think we have to follow up if there's any concerns or questions by the end of the month. And then it will go out to the public in the state for all districts. This year, though, how I love this friendly document, just because how it is broken up,
Yeah.
it looks very different this year, and I think it's moving forward. So it's actually a 4-page document, and it brings in some more details, which is a good thing. But it just looks a little different, I think, for districts in the state to really go over it and look at it. So these indicators, how we came out with, let me move forward here. And we mentioned, and we have 2 of the goal areas in the comp plan. One is on indicator 2, which is the dropout rate, and then the other is indicator 5, least restrictive environment. And you may ask why and how. So every 5 years, typically, a district goes throughout the state, we go through what's called compliance monitoring. You might be familiar with that, you might not. But what happens is people come down from the Bureau and other individuals, and they're really looking at our entire special education documentation, paperwork. They'll do interviews with students, they'll do interviews with special ed teachers.
These are like spot interviews that
Yes.
do the list and they'll be like, I'm gonna go to this person's classroom.
Yes, and then typically, I believe within 10 days of the date of the, they're typically here a couple of days,
Okay.
2 to 3 days. And I think it's within like those 10 days to the date of the start of it, they'll give us 10 names, for example. And those students, we then, from the time they entered special education until present day, those files will be ready for them to review and go through. So following compliance monitoring, which if you recall for anybody that was here in the spring of 2019, we went through compliance monitoring. And the results of that did come out. I think we had discussed this prior, some of the information or perhaps lack of information. There was also a transition at that time in the special education department with administration, if you recall, in 2019.
Because it was, it was the guy.
Yes,
The guy that-
I was here. I came in 2013 and I left the district in February of 2018.
George.
Yes. And then I returned October of 2019. And also Dr. Farina, under her role, had been working under curriculum instruction, if you recall, for a
Yep.
period of time. We got notification from the compliance monitoring. There were 2 areas of improvement for the district to work on, and these were dropout rates and least restrictive environment for students placed in other settings. There's typically 3 areas in least restrictive environment that we look at, and I'll show you that when we go on to that one. And typically, if there's an improvement plan for a district from that, it will typically last 2 years. So there's goals that, when at that time Andrea and I had developed the goals and the action steps, and over those next 2 years you work on that.
So compliance sort of audit And then
Yeah.
if they see areas of need,
Yes.
they get, you're like on a 2-year review period.
Yes,
Okay.
if it's considered, and there could be minimal errors here and there, so you work, you communicate with your team, which
Right,
makes
some
it
stuff is
monthly.
probably just
Right,
like-
but these are larger areas that they find to be, obviously, if they're giving you 2 years and they really want you to work on it, it's a need. So these were 2 areas that came out from that.
Okay.
Those 2 years were up at the end of, this school year. So we submitted all of our information, all of our data to the Bureau. They reviewed it. I will share with you, we don't have the formal notification of it. I will share with you in the area of least restrictive environment. It will be removed due to the overall progress.
Okay.
In the area of indicator 2 dropout rates, informally, I know and we know we're going to continue with that improvement plan over the next year. Meaning there continue to be, we don't disagree either.
Okay.
We believe there are areas that need to be improved and worked on. So in the end, we take that as, that's not a bad thing, because the goal is to decrease dropout rates. So we'll
That's
talk,
why you brought you wrote the grant for P to G.
yeah,
So,
Right.
and that goes for another year, that
Okay.
grant. So
Correct.
Okay.
It's going to coincide.
So that grant is an effort, a way to correct the issue that's going on.
it's one of the
It's
efforts.
one.
One of the issues,
It's
yeah,
one of the-
multifaceted,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure,
yeah.
approach to trying to correct a problem. Because this isn't just hey, if we fix this, then it's good. I
Yeah,
imagine it's-
no, even as we added the goal in least restrictive environment, as I said, there's three areas they look at. We received the improvement plan in one of those areas for our students that are placed in out-of-district other settings, which is basically out-of-district programs, placements, alternative schools. But we felt it was important, you don't work on one. So our goal was really set to work on, in the comprehensive plan, to work on all 3 areas, which is basically the other 2 focus areas are for our students here in district to be placed in we call it the least restrictive environment, which is with typical kids. But our job of the case managers and as a unit here is to make sure that the level, every student, that's why it's individualized, can continue to make growth and progress. Because if they can't, we have to look at that as a team and then we can make some changes. So for this one, this is some information really from that SPP or that report card over those years. Now, the 2021 was not out, but because of submitting the data for the improvement plans, working with the advisor from the Bureau, I know that that's the accurate information because we worked with her. And so you can clearly see, look at 2021. So the target is 10.97% there. And I can go down and share, actually communicate with you literally the number of student dropouts, what that means, and you look at.
LEA rate, dropout rate, is that what that?
Yeah, that's the school district's dropout rate.
Okay.
Yes.
The
over
whole
that school year.
district, not just.
So what if,
Special education students
Okay.
in the K to 12.
Okay, so special education, K to 12, 15% of our students within this district are dropping.
In that school year dropout. I will
That's
share with you, that was 8 students.
Out of, like, what's the total of special education students that we have?
Well, in the district,
Figure
we
it out.
have, I believe it's 497 students, but if you're looking at the high school level, obviously a smaller number. I can tell you though, because of the calculations, I believe there were, on that particular year, there were 53 eligible students to graduate, special education students at the high school, and 46 did graduate. There's a whole calculation that you use. I will also say, even moving forward with improvements and how that's calculated, there's snapshots taken. And then it's the information system and the PIMS coordinator inputs that. I will not share specifically, but I can tell you over the 21-22 school year, that is not the case, meaning a thumbs up. At this stage of the game, we're nowhere near those numbers, so the school year isn't over, but we are definitely, it's very good.
I have one more question, I'm sorry. If they transfer to a different That's not a dropout. So these are literally, they did not finish.
These are literally, yeah, so there's really different calculations that, that we look at to do that. I mean, even for the dropout rate, if a student were to drop out and then return the following school year, so then you have to, and that has actually happened, where they may have dropped out and then they re-registered, which as a special education student you can. And then, for example, so then we would look at that piece, but then with that particular student, for example, they didn't start the school year, even though that was the plan. So I think the area of improvement really to work on here, which again, we have within the comprehensive plan, as well as here with some of the personnel development that we talk about, professional development, we'll delve into that to continue to work on that area. And you can see moving forward, sort of just look at that level, because we're talking dropout rate, restorative practices, like right there. The full, like the implementation did occur this year, but implementation of the professional development for some. It's not fully, you know, that's just one example. P2G is another one. Our long-range goal for P2G is to branch this up to the high school. Because, and for those that aren't familiar with P2G, research really does show, and then I'll stop talking and move on. But research really does show those issues and concerns are not known to start in high school. It is starting, and they find that through that research in middle school, that age level. And so we did apply for this grant, and we work very closely with Patan as well as the MCIU. It's a 2-year grant, and so we, as you know, Judy stated, we'll be moving into our 2nd year there. But even on the comprehensive plan in the goal areas, the goal over those years is to really branch it out and move it up to the high school. And there's specific things that we do believe support graduation rates and support decreasing dropout rates.
So I have one question for you.
Yes.
So are we, when we had this audit, or are we looking at the state rate, or are we comparing against this target? What?
So I would love to say that the target rate is the state rate, because if we looked at a lot of the areas for the state rate, we are better than the average of the state rate in many of our indicators, but no, it's the target rate. And which is typically a higher level, or depending on what if it's dropout rates, you can see, and in the 1920 school year, it was 9%, which every other year, it was 10.9%.
Right.
Like, so you would have seen in 1920, we clearly would have achieved that goal, but we can't determine how they, so that is where we are in 2021. But we have plans.
Before we move forward, anybody else, any questions on these slides in particular, or this slide in particular? Carol, if somebody is watching at home, could you just go back one? Thank you. Could you just say what LEA, SPP, APR are for those watching at home?
So the LEA is just another.
What's that an
Oh
acronym
my
for?
goodness,
Local
okay.
educational.
Yeah, local education.
Local educational agency.
See, I can't even with the acronyms.
All right, so Sarah, what is SPP mean?
Yeah, Sarah, what's SPP?
School, is it like my SPP, the school performance profile?
So it's the student performance plan.
That's
yeah.
the Jonas File, sorry.
It's the SPP, and if you look at the, yeah, it's the student performance plan.
I was thinking scheduled
like I
personal
said,
property.
but.
It stands for a lot of different things.
Yes, I don't know if there's another area that has as many acronyms as special education.
Healthcare.
No.
There you go.
What about, you should see all, I mean,
PE, we know, Pennsylvania Department of Education.
APR?
Percentage, yeah.
Annual percentage.
I think that's probably what it is.
Yeah.
But when they talk about the LEA, that's just a PDE term for us.
For us, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
which is
Well,
typically-
Individual school district.
Yeah.
And typically in special education, every annual IEP meeting, it lists there must be an LEA, which is typically, it's either the building principal, assistant principal, or someone, Amy or myself, in attendance at the meeting, like it's one of the required members.
Like an LEA rep.
Right.
Right.
Yes, who
Because-
makes financial
Yeah.
decisions and things like that.
The teacher can't be the
Right.
LEA representative, it has to be somebody with an administrative.
Right.
No, that makes
So
sense
they
to
use the
me.
term LEA sometimes to refer to a person,
Right.
and sometimes to refer to a school, and sometimes to a
Yeah.
district. Kind of, they use that term just basically.
Very broadly.
Anybody who's providing education.
Fantastic.
Formally.
Prego, you're an LEA.
Any other questions on this one?
What was the APR?
They're still trying to.
Annual percentage ratio?
I think, yeah.
I will say they typically, in any communications anywhere, it is, they'll refer to it as just the student performance plan target. And they have calculations as well for that piece. The LEA rate, the state rate. The state rate is going to be your, looking at the average, all of the school districts within the.
It would appear that no one tends to meet the goal then. And they set the rate at 10%, but everyone appears to be over it.
Well,
Some
that's
people
before.
make it, but
Yeah.
that's still not the target. They want the state to improve.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, even when we look at one of the areas, it's not an indicator, but they'll look at enrollment, and they'll look at for special education across the state. And so, like for 2021, we're at, over 1 million students and 1.5, actually almost 1.7 million students that are all special ed, and then the percentage of students, they look at that percent to see where a district is, the enrollment. And the state averages for 2021 was 18.1%. Upper Perk is at 15.1. And if you were to go back and look at over the years, it was much higher. And so
Yes.
obviously you have to, I mean, I will say, I believe back in 2013, we were up at 19%.
Right before Andrea came.
Yeah, we were high.
We had, one of the audits, that was an area for improvement, was our enrollment
Yeah.
in special ed was too high.
So how do you improve that? Identify.
You improve your tier 1, 2, and 3 instruction so that students don't need to be enrolled in special ed.
And then you
Which is
also,
why Andrea worked so hard to bring in the MTS program.
yeah, and then the other area is as a unit, as special education, so we have for years, we do monthly meetings at our buildings. Each building is separate. We do monthly, we have an agenda, and it's during that time, it's typically no more than 45 minutes, but it's every month throughout the school year. And there's professional development in that time. There are updates, there are things that we may see through paperwork that comes, and what's good for one school, if it's occurring here in 2 schools, it's added on it for all 5 schools, so everybody is aware this is something we need to look at and work on. And then following those meetings, we have one-to-one meetings with every teacher, typically on the same day we do the group meeting. So Amy and I will do that, we set that up through the months, and I do believe on top of the MTSS, on top of all the other areas, I believe that is really supportive, I think, and beneficial. It's an open door where teachers too, if there's something here, but then it's also for them to bring out any questions that they may have, and what's a question for one, is a question for many others. So a lot of times that comes up in the group meeting, which is really beneficial.
Carol, is there any chances, is that a typo, or did it really, the average come out to 13.39 both years? 'Cause I would
And
have
it's not a
thought,
typo.
I would have thought the state rate would have risen as well with all the challenges of COVID and the whole 9 yards. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go through this, I'm just gonna drop out, and,
Yeah, so their
So
calculation,
their average really was the same 2 years in a row?
I can only go with what they provide, you know what I mean, what they provide us, information there.
Interesting. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
And it's a true average, it's not like a median or anything like that, it's a true average.
Our understanding is it would be the average with all of the school districts and their
Like,
rates.
true average, okay, all right.
Any other questions on that one?
No, but that was a good discussion.
It was. So this is just some of the areas that we did work with the same indicator over the past 2 years, areas that the district, just some of them. I mean, we could go on to list others. I will say for both of these, as we go forward, and part of our expectation and listed was the review of the district policies. And if you just look at the term dropout rates and you look at all the areas that the board and the district did look at, these were all addressed. And if you go into the actual, that's now lying out, the special ed plan, there's more detailed, obvious information in those things, but these are areas that, as a district, you all had looked at. And clearly, if you look, every one of these areas very likely has an impact on this indicator. Eupola Implementation had been formally implemented this school year, and then we know what had transpired over COVID. The addition of the 0.5 BCBA through the MCIU, that was added in that year as well. We've had that support for 2 years. And then these are some of the PD areas that we did work on, FBA, or Functional Behavior Assessment, PBSB, Positive Behavior Support Plans. Moving forward, and you'll see some of our, in this, when we get towards the end, a big focus of the special ed plan, which is a 3-year plan typically, is personnel development, basically professional development, and there's 7 areas that you have to focus on. So I'll share that. But the point of bringing that up is that we'll have a refresher over the 22-23 school year with support from the MCIU for our K-12 guidance counselors, as well as our special education teachers K-12, because you do not need to be a special education student if there's an identified need, say for example through MTSS, and somebody is in a tier 2 or tier 3, it might be at the level where they're recommending to do an FBA, and that's where the guidance counselors come into play. QBS, continue to do that, and then obviously the MTSS implementation.
What's QBS? I know MTSS.
Oh, so that is the behavioral, the de-escalation quality, behavior solutions is the formal name of it. You are. I'm so used to saying them, I'm like, but basically that is our de-escalation program for behaviors, supporting students. And that's one of the areas in personnel development that is going to be a change moving in next year onward with additional supports throughout the district. And then MTSS, and then the early warning system, or EWS. I told you. Basically, MTSS is clearly that, and then obviously P2G is an early warning system as well. And I think after this piece, we'll review a couple of where we are at the end of the school year for P2G. And then attendance procedures, SAFE. Anybody? That is student attendance improvement plan.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there are requirements in the state of Pennsylvania for students and attendance. And so they're at a certain level following the process of procedures that the building principals administrators do. It may come to the point of a safe development or student attendance improvement plan. Where that impacts special education is we have asked moving forward over the last 1.5 to 2 years, if it is a special education student, please, because it's typically run by the administrator and the parent, and the guidance counselor will typically participate. If it's a special education student, we have asked that those case managers be invited to the meeting as well. Now we know with schedules and other meetings and things that may or may not happen, but really the point of that is to share if there is a safe development, because it typically will lead to a revision in the IEP.
So have the case manager at the IEP meeting for the lead to a revision. Is that what you just said?
So if they have a student attendance improvement plan meeting due to concern with attendance, and they're a special education student, we ask the administrator to invite the special education teacher also.
Okay.
They may or may not, it's not required to attend, but following that, if there is a plan that's developed to support the student with getting to school daily, our special education teachers typically that will turn into a revision or a change in the IEP, because attendance is part of functional performance for our kids, so that's why we want to make sure that the whole team is aware.
It's an actual meeting that you establish goals as a team, the parents involved, teachers are involved, administrators are involved.
Yeah.
At times, the student is involved or should be involved, depending on the age of the student.
Okay.
And you're establishing family and student strengths, needs, goals, and really discussing possible reasons why there might be attendance issues,
Okay.
which could be a variety of things. But it's an actual document that you work through as a team, and it's kind of like, it's not an IEP, but it has a similar idea of you're working together as a team to establish what the strengths, needs are, and what goals you should put in place to support that student's attendance.
Okay, all right, cool.
Certainly a family.
It is very much, it must be, I mean, it has to be family.
It's a formal requirement now. A few years ago, this PDE made it a requirement that schools do this for what they consider chronically truant students, which, believe it or not, is anyone with 10 or more unexcused absences.
And there's letters
not a
that go
lot.
out to
So,
families.
Yeah.
like usually after like 5 or 6, I don't know whatever PERC's number is, like there's usually a letter that goes out to the parents that says, hey, your child's, missing a lot of school, please reach out to us if there's, something going on. But these meetings used to be fairly informal, but a few years ago, PD really formalized it. So, what happens at Upper Perk is the same thing that's happening at North Penn and Pottstown and everything. So, as I said, it's a serious thing, and I'm sure it takes a lot of time for your staff to do those meetings.
And
Yeah.
you come back, and you come back together to revisit the SEEP. So it's not just necessarily a one and done thing. It's, having additional meetings to talk as the team, to discuss whether or not the plan that's in place is working, so.
Lots of meetings. Lots of meetings.
In special education, you better.
Lots of meetings. Just that,
Tell Carol about it.
no, I'm sure. I can only imagine. Does anybody have any questions on that last slide? Because. Okay.
So the second area that was designated was the least restrictive environment, and that came out of the compliance monitoring. So you can see, I won't read it to you, but the goal, again, at that time, there's the 3 areas, and you can see that on the right. So you SE, special education. So special education inside regular education classroom, 80% or more of their school day. That's the one area. The next one is special education students inside regular education classroom, less than 40% of their day. And then the last one there is special education students placed in other settings. So that is the area that came out in the other settings for our students. And you can but we work on all of those areas. And so in special education, there's different areas that we look at. Our goal for the students is to be with the typical kids, as we talked earlier, but we also know they must make growth and progress. So if it is with, for example, and we know at our middle and high school level, we do have co-teaching, but we also have teachers that may what we call push in, K-12, and they may push in, and the reason is to check in on the students, see, and to follow up that area. And then obviously we have paraprofessionals, which are critical to the supporting of our students, and they will, a large majority of their school day is supporting students in the general education classroom. So this is all about what in special education we call place time. And this is where the education supports are occurring. And the goal, as far as the state and as far as Upper Perk and everyone is concerned, we want our kids, and we really need to, this is an indicator, to have them. But again, the final thing is, that's why it's individualized. They must be making progress in that environment. And so every student may look really, really different.
Since COVID, have there been, with like the staffing losses and things like that, has that affected any of this? And that there's not like enough aids for some of the students
yes.
and things like that?
Yes.
So that can affect this number?
Well, so, but because, you know, in special education, the documents are all legal documents. So, yes, the impact of lack of staff and support, whether from agencies or our own Upper Perkiomen School District, paraprofessionals, PCAs, or one-to-ones, clearly has an impact. For example, if we have a student assigned has a PCA or a one-to-one, well, just because their PCA or one-to-one is absent tomorrow, we are required to support them, which typically can mean they will work on that day, because somebody's out, a teacher's out, they work, they rearrange the schedule, and typically a paraprofessional, and maybe there's two of them, and they're looking at the schedules where the supports are needed, but the student with the one-to-one and the PCA, that's listed in their IEP, they need those supports, so a lot of shifting on the day, on the morning, may happen. So yes, if we had all of our positions filled, yes, we would be, it would be different, perhaps. I don't know if necessarily any of this would be, but I don't know if that's a side, maybe question just for supports for kids. So we're still required, whether there's a shortage or staff are out, whether it was due to COVID or any reason, it clearly impacts the support for our kids. So our principals, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, it is very familiar to them to be moving and going to different classrooms to support on a particular day, if that's needed, because we still have to support.
Is it one of those things where, like, a kid to be in the least restrictive environment has to have that aid with them? If they don't have that aid with them, then they stay, like, in a special, how does that? No?
That would, we wouldn't be providing them with their least restrictive environment. So I'll give you for example.
Okay.
Say that a paraprofessional supports a student in their related arts class, like, music class or PE.
Okay.
Just because a paraprofessional isn't there doesn't mean that student shouldn't go to that class. So,
Okay.
so that means, because teachers do their best to be creative to support their students, and it
Absolutely.
might feel like a good idea, well, we'll just keep them in here and we'll just do music or whatever in the special education classroom. We're not providing them with FAPE, and we're not providing a free appropriate public education, and we're not allowing them to participate in their least restrictive environment. So as Carol said, that means we are a team, we work together, and there are times where, it might work out where, this paraprofessional typically supports 5 students, well, 2 of them are out today, so we can shift people to another classroom or to support other students. It seems to work out. Are there days where there's multiple people out and it's a struggle? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think by nature, special education, all teachers, all educators, I would just say, but administrators as well. It's problem solving it's just part of your natural environment. It happens 24/7.
Right.
That you have to be flexible, you have to staff, teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, and so it is an ongoing daily basis. But to answer that, as Amy said, no, it's not okay for the student not to go to art that day because we have so many individuals out. We
Yeah.
need that student to still go to art. We just need to somehow figure it out on that day for those 45 minutes, which can be really hard, but it's what we work.
But I gotta tell you, our administrators and our teachers and our other paraprofessionals are student-focused and student-centered, and they work it out. Rarely do I come to a situation where, I'm being told we just can't do this. So.
Well, it's nice that we can still offer that, even though as Emily was mentioned about earlier, there's a shortage all over the place,
Yes.
right? Not, bus drivers, and
Yes.
paraprofessionals, and we see it in all industries.
Yes.
So it's nice that, individuals are getting creative to find ways to make sure the kids still get in the classroom. But I would imagine that would be, quite a lot some days. Like,
Yeah.
here you go, but he's got to be here, but we gotta
Yeah.
figure out a way to, so.
Yeah, and we continue to work on it. So, Did we think 21, 22 would have looked the way it did the year before? No. It actually, in some senses, if you communicate with people, I think this school year in all of those areas has been difficult, but everybody just goes above and beyond. Will 22, 23 be the world of pre-COVID for support and that? The goal is, we're certainly hoping yes, but we'll, you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, so the teachers, and paraprofessionals, administrators, they just continue to work together, really to support.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was just gonna say, these percentages we're a small school district, and a couple of students can really throw our
Correct.
percentages out of whack. Do we get any kind of leeway for foster children or homeless?
No. So to answer your question, no, but what I will also say, I think that's a good point you bring up, because the area in other settings where the improvement plan was, so if you look at a district the size of, say, a Norristown, or the size of, say, North Penn, if you look at the different programs that they have, life skills, K-12, or there's typically, I'm going to say generally, there's probably not a program on the continuum that they don't have. Why? Because look at the number of the students they have. We have 3,400 students, and there are clearly districts, like a Springfield down the road has 1,700 kids, but we're I would say, we're not a large district, we're a mid-size perhaps, but due to those numbers, would we say we're going to have MDS programs K-12, we're going to have life skills K-12, we're going to do full strict emotional support K-12. I think those are some of those questions, because you don't necessarily, because you have to look at your number, you have to sustain. And so sometimes that can be a cause for looking at an out-of-district placement or program, which could impact as well the numbers.
The last column.
So I got some questions on this one. First, so we have looks like there's a goal that's set 5 years out from now for 2027. Was the other for indicator 2, wasn't that a 2-year?
Yeah, so there's two different things here. So the improvement plans were the typical 2-year plan, because there is that need. So there is the goal, which was also this goal, but as far as compliance or the comprehensive plan going out to 2027, we're continuing that goal moving forward to look at those areas. So, and then I'll also say for the special education plan, they're always only 3-year plans. So this current plan was expected to be 2021 through 2024. And the state made the determination due to COVID to extend that, and now hence you see it's due in July of 2022. But still that plan would be up in 2024. However, due to the nature, that's a hop, skip, and a jump, one might say, in 2024, and you look at the plan and development. So what they did, because a large part of the plan is personnel development or professional development, the districts could choose to do an option A, which is strictly input your information to go through to end in 2024, and then you resubmit for 3 years. Or option B was the districts can, throughout the state, submit a 5-year professional development or personnel development. So Upper Perk decided to do 5 years.
Okay.
But still in 24, we'll need to go back in there, which I think benefits us to have it this way, but in 2024, or leading to that, we can go in and make changes, we can revise. If we clearly see, here's an area that we consistently are adding yearly and we are really making growth, or the other way, then we can tweak or make changes to it because it'll be resubmitted.
So did we decide then to go after the percentage for the special education in other settings? Because it seems like the past 5 years that are on here, we consistently, except for the first 2 years, have gone down. So that seems to be a good trend. Whereas the inside regular classrooms kind of been stagnant, kind of going the wrong way. So was that our decision to go after the other places, other settings, instead of trying to get the target for the 80%?
No, so what I will say to you, so if you look at special ed in the regular education, 80% or more of their day, that is, the higher we go, is where we want to be. We want to be at 80-90% for that in a perfect world, as long as our kids are making progress. It is an area, and 2021 is not listed in there, and I believe, because I looked at it, I believe we're at 64% from that last school year. Don't quote me on that, but that area, we continue to work with staff and supports to get to that level to improve that. If you look, just for example, if you look at 18-19 and 17-18 there, you'll see what the target was, 64.1%. So we're continuing to, and I believe, like I said, it is higher. And I believe if that rate, that we may have achieved that, unless the target went up. We're still looking at it, so I don't want to give you a specific.
That's fine.
But no, the goal is not to just look at that out of district. It is clearly to look at the other area. And you can clearly see the less than 40%, the district does well with that.
Right.
It's really to have our students with typical kids, and it's just making sure that support is. So it's student-based, individually based, but we just have to focus on it.
I just didn't see, because I assumed if you reduce the other settings portion of it, then the inside regular classroom should increase, you'd think.
Say that again?
If the other settings decreases, that means they're spending more time in the classroom.
So
You think.
what classroom though? So that, it's not necessarily true, I would say. So if Amy, we work really closely together for our students that are placed in out-of-district settings for them to return. But if you look at, let's say for example, a student is placed in out-of-district placement in an emotional support program. I would say, coming from that type of a setting, which is 100% special education students for most of the programs that we work with, to coming back to district, I might say, don't quote me, but I might say to transition them back, we might start with a higher level of support because now we are in our public or home school, so they might be what we would call a supplemental level, which is less time initially. The goal is to get them to that.
Right.
But because we're now in a setting that is much more or less restrictive than out of district, so
I got you.
it's not apples to apples really, but
Right.
yeah.
And isn't it true that obviously these other settings are way more expensive than having them in-house, right?
That would be a yes.
Yes, okay. So that's another reason to, I'm not saying that's the main reason or anything like that, but obviously, somebody brought it up at some point, like bringing more of those kids back into the buildings, into our buildings in whatever function that may be,
Yes.
whether it's in, one way or the other, it saves us money as opposed to sending them out for special places because you got transportation. Some of these special education schools are super expensive.
So we also, just to add to that, we do Act 16, which is another annual report for special education, which will happen early fall. And with that is where we clearly break it down. Or students in district, and if you look at per pupil cost versus the cost for a student to be placed out of district, it's extremely different. The cost for an out of district student typically is much, much, much higher. And every student is different. So there are certain numbers, they identify them, and it's by the cost that's put out for like the related services, transportation, all of that, and then the alternative school program costs. If a student needs, for example, a one-to-one, you put all of that together, and it can be an extremely high cost for that student.
Is there, not related to that, but something else, we're talking about these numbers, and obviously we have the targets we want to hit. If we see that we didn't hit, let's take 2018, 2019, where we didn't hit, we were looking at 64.1, we actually got 61.2. When we review it as a district, when you guys are looking at an administrative level, is it just like, man, that number stinks? Or is it like, well, let's actually, if we look at what we had in the classrooms, you can justify that 62.1%. Do you ever look at it like, kind of like back a little bit more?
So
I guess?
we'll look at those numbers, obviously, but I don't think we look at this on the outside lens looking in. You can't do that, I don't believe, in the world of special education,
Okay.
because just like the word IEP individual, we're gonna make recommendations, the teachers, the school teams are gonna make recommendations based on that student's least restrictive, which hopefully is increasing here. But it really is the student that is there, the supports we put in place, the progress they make. So we can't say, in 22, 23, there's no option here, we're gonna be better than, we're gonna be at least 65%. We would love to say that, but again, you have to look at the students.
No, that's what I would want
yeah,
you to say.
Yeah.
I don't want you to go, you know, we just can't, this 62.1 was great, you know,
The
like,
other piece too is, students move into our district who are already placed, and we had that situation last year where we had 2 students move in who were already placed somewhere that's not close by. We look at all of the individual pieces of that to determine whether or not those students would remain there,
yeah.
But we also are not able to control who might move into the school district and already be in a place.
To add to that, though, we are required, as districts, when a student does come in as far as the special education, the expectation is the program that they come in with, we need to as closely align to what they come in with. So that does impact you as well. Plus, you do not know, what's written in black and white doesn't always, you want to meet, see the student, and maybe the goal will be, if they're placed, typically we will look, because we're required to align with that. And then, our teachers here, or wherever they're placed, within 30 days, our teachers will get some data, and then we go from there.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was curious, with your goal of 2%. I know that a few years ago, we did a really great job of trying to bring a lot of students
Yeah.
back. So I'm curious, because I think we actually have done a pretty good job, and our students right now that are placed out, they truly are placed out because it is what's in their best interest. So I'm curious as to what your plan is to reduce that number by 2%.
Amy can talk to that in a minute. I'll just say really quickly, because Amy does typically work with a number of our students that are placed for the meetings for them out of district. But I will also say that goal has never changed, has never ended. And even this year in 21, 22, our students are returning. They are transitioning back. We have students returning at the start of the school year that are currently placed. So that's always a big, big goal for us. We don't, again, a student has needs, and then we make that recommendation. Our goal, which we'll tell every parent, is not for your child to attend that school. Our goal is for your student to attend our schools, because that's where they live, it's their community. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I do oversee our out-of-district students, and I work very closely with the programs that they attend. And I am in constant communication with them. We meet frequently. We do have some students where they have a very high level of need where we don't necessarily have the programming that we would be capable of addressing those needs. However, we don't disregard that, and we're not writing anybody off in terms of wanting to work with possibly bringing students back. But I do, meet frequently with IEP teams in those programs, and the goal is to bring the students back. It's a very, very careful decision, and it has to be a decision that is very well thought out. I go see the students, I go see the programs, and they have to be making progress on their IEP goals. And we just need to make sure that when we do bring them back, they reintegrate back into our school district, that we do have those supports in place. And as Carol mentioned, that may mean, they might be supplemental for a while, where they might be spending a little more time in the emotional support setting until they can gradually sort of transition into, more general education settings. So it's a very careful decision. It's an IEP team decision. So it's not Amy Coyle is walking in here saying, you're coming back. It's, this student is making great progress. Let's see where the student is at. Do we feel that the student is ready this year, next year? We also want to be careful too when the time of year that we're transitioning students back. It's not really ideal, like in the middle of the school year. Not to say that that wouldn't happen and that couldn't be appropriate, but it's a very well thought out, careful process.
It's a transition plan for kids to come back. And typically, if you talk about looking more at the high school level, it really is a transition. So she talked about timelines, but we don't want to keep a student placed out of district just because it's more difficult with scheduling. That's not the goal, but it also may support a student if we wait till the quarters start or if we wait for the semester. For that student, it's helping them maybe as well with their transition back. We have in the past as well, depending on the program, minimally happens, but I've done in the past where we'll have a student transition back here, but we may work it where every other day for a week or 2 weeks, they're coming to us every other day and they're going back to their program every other day. So they're not out of the program yet, but we look at that transition to make the full. We work with transportation, we work with the high school team to do whatever is needed, because the one thing that we do not want is for things not to work out and that we're looking at placement again. So you have to be careful.
And part of that process too, or the beginning part of that process, is having the student tour the school building so that they understand this is what the hallways look like when classes are transitioning, or this is what the cafeteria, you want them to also wrap their minds around, okay, because some of the environments that the placements that our students are in are very small class sizes, adult to student ratio numbers are, there's more adult support. So we certainly don't want to, also say, hey, so-and-so is ready to come back, and just kind of throw them in there without giving an opportunity for a tour to meet the principal and just sort of, understand the environment that they might be transitioning back to. So.
Did you have a question? No. Okay. In most cases, and I know we spent a lot of time on this slide, but I think we have a lot of good questions, which is great. When we talk about the kids that are outside placed, without getting into specifics, because I know there's rules about that, but what are the sort of reasons that get them placed out?
So I'll give you an example of when I did come to the district back in 2013, we had a number of students that were placed due to their level of need, and it wasn't in regard to behavior, it was due to their level of functioning. So they had a high level, that's a reason at times as well, high levels of needs. And if you look at some of the programming, go back some years for those students, so they started in a program, and it's very difficult. You have to work as a team as well. If you're in a program and you're making progress there, which is great, thinking along those lines of a student that has that severity of disability, intellectual disability, some of those areas, and they've been attending that program for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, that's their world. So if you look at that, those students in programming, so it's really, really working closely with the parents as the student transitions. For example, there is, programs that have after the 18 to 21 program. And what does that look like? We have been pretty fortunate. We have worked really over the years to bring back some of those students, because we also know this is their community, even if they have such a high level of need. And we have some of our students that are currently here were placed perhaps in that program or that type of a program, and our teachers work with us. We've come for a tour, as Amy talked about, the transition, and they have returned to district. But then again, some of them, due to behavioral needs or emotional support needs, that then you'll go to the umpteenth level to support that student, and then the data, it's the data that's going to lead to where the team goes with recommendations.
Right, because I would think that, I don't know if you do this or not, but I would think that also when, say, bringing back somebody with behavioral stuff, I'd also want to look at like what the impact would be on the students in the classrooms they're placed with, right? You're nodding your head yet, right? Like that's part of it too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's all.
Yeah, it's all part of the thing.
But
Do you
that's
think-
why, as you said, coming back and some of the kids who may have behavioral needs, We want to make sure that the support is there and available, and as Amy said as well, their return may be initially, absolutely, a lot more time is being spent within the special education classroom, and then over time and data and progress, the goal would be to transition them out.
As far as like personal care needs and stuff like that, of the outplaced kids, how many, and obviously people can have multiple struggles. How many do you think is the personal needs portion of the percentage that's out?
I don't think that would be necessarily,
If that's-
because we
that's
do
too
have
much.
personal care, or we
Yeah.
do have PCAs here in the district,
Yeah.
K to 12.
Okay.
There's.
I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head
So
around
years ago, for
why-
some of those kids that I mentioned there, we did not have at that level, I'm talking at elementary, we didn't have that level of programming. So if you're looking, we didn't have MDS, not that we necessarily, but to sustain and the numbers there. So that was, we typically had autistic support and we had learning support.
Right.
And you clearly may have students with that higher level of need.
Yeah.
And to support them here, yes, PCAs, we do that K to 12, if that's the basic need. But if there is just a lot more needs required, the team, and at that time, I'm not saying, I don't know, but these students had been, for example, when I came in 2013, we had a number of students with those needs who had already been out for placed in a program for a number of years. So, you have to respect that too. That's where they were getting the support. And so if you are looking to transition and bring the student back, it really does need to be that team effort.
I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head about who is outplaced, like what is that?
driver behind it?
Yeah, what's the driver on that? Thank you, yeah.
Well, it wouldn't even just necessarily be ones with emotional support, because that's what you tend to be looking at. But I'm thinking of, okay, like, let's say we have a family who moves in and they have a child who's deaf and blind.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying, yeah,
It would not make sense for our district to bring in the kind of resources we would need to give that child.
If you want to talk about money, that would be way much more.
And that's the program, so if we were to hire, like right now currently, we have a number of kids that require hearing support, related services, and vision support. We go through the IU, and clearly when you see the shared service plan, if you were to look at that, and we support those students, but if you're talking somebody who, it may be something along those lines, you have to make that determination based on that student.
Yeah.
So if
And there's
there's,
so many things that can happen.
yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
to be outplaced.
Okay.
Were we supposed to see that list of students?
No, I don't want to see that list of
No, no, no,
kids.
no.
I don't want to see that
It
list.
was in our.
I'm just kind of,
No.
I don't know.
I don't think it was that, I think it was the piece of, like, some of the services that our kids get, and those, and
It
clearly.
surprised me that we got that list with students attached to it.
What list?
In our packet, in the last meeting, we had a list of students and the costs associated for the intermediate unit.
The last regular board meeting?
Yeah,
I don't think it had
we
their,
had like a dozen kids listed.
I don't think it had their names though.
Yeah, it did.
Did it?
One listed and one listed.
Yeah, I'll have to follow up on that, but no, you wouldn't, but it's basically, like, the goal of that is to see the, like, students that do require.
Hey, got Andrea's version. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding.
I'm like, I don't
You
remember
have it?
seeing
Yeah,
that.
see, like that in here.
Okay.
In the meanwhile.
In the meanwhile, we can move right
I
along.
just looked at our board update. But there were two very similar lists. and
No, I-
Students attached to it. And I knew some of the kids in it.
We'll have to,
We'll look at that.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll
look
Yeah,
at
that was just weird that, it surprised me that we got a list like that.
We'll look into it.
Never mind.
no, it's not a never mind. It's
Yeah, we'll
definitely
No, we
look at,
definitely
we'll,
look into that.
yeah, we'll look into
Thank you
that
for bringing
because
that up.
That was just an
Yeah.
off the cuff
Yeah.
comment that we,
Yeah.
That'd be off the cuff.
shocked me that we, that I saw that.
So
Because
we'll look
everything
into
else, it's never identified with students.
No. Well, like when we have like student number or,
Correct.
well, we had the one last time that didn't even say anything. It was just like,
Yeah, we
this is
haven't-
happening.
We haven't been for
Yeah.
the last several months. It's just as a student on file.
Which is fine.
Because, you know, if putting a student ID number, somebody might be able to figure out who that is, theoretically.
Probably.
You know, so that's why we stopped putting the student ID.
I like that idea.
You know, you as a board member.
I don't wanna know.
You know.
I don't wanna know.
What's on file.
I don't want to know, unless of course I have to know.
Right. Classes said you need to know.
Yeah.
So moving forward, I'll continue. These were areas over the last 2 years in least restrictive environment. You can see I do bring up some of the years with improvements in other settings for some of those areas, and clearly it is decreasing. And again, a number of the similar areas that were part of indicator 5 are also for this as well, in indicator 2. Looking at policies, district policies, the addition of some services, professional development as well. And I believe I shared on this one, we haven't received the formal notification, but informally we did receive notification from the Bureau of Special Education that this improvement plan will be removed. Any questions on that?
So we've been talking about least restrictive all night, and there's more acronyms on here. So,
Nice.
so universal practices to address student needs with accommodations to learning environments. So we really have been sort of talking about that through the course of the evening. MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. School-wide positive behavior intervention support is the second acronym. Second Step and COMCAT. Second Step is our SEL, social emotional learning program at the K-3. K-7, sorry. And then COMCAT is K-3, and it's part of our student assistance program, which is the next acronym. And then QBS, qualitative behavior solutions, for our safety care, de-escalation training and program, restorative practices, and then programming and training to ensure meaningful learning in general education. So SDI, specially designed instruction, that is part of students' IEPs. That's the modifications and accommodations that students need to access their education in the general education setting. Supplemental aids and services, again, aligns with specially designed instruction that might also include, adult supports, training, teacher, parent collaboration, professional development through PATAN and Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, which I believe we already spoke about. And then we have currently a full-time behavior specialist in our school district and 6 RBTs.
Yes.
Help me, Carol.
Registered behavior technicians. So they were added, that also had come out during the 1920 school year is when our RBT.
1920?
2019-2020 school year is when that moved forward, and that was that full year of the 2019-2020 school year where they went through the training. So then it was fully then implemented in the 2020, 2021 school district, and still is today.
Does everybody get QBS, or is that for like certain individuals?
So we're going to talk about that. Well,
Ooh, fantastic.
Yeah, that's.
Is that a segue for your next slide?
There's
Or
no,
am I
but it
too
will
early?
be if we get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we get there.
You better, I got 2 birthdays.
No, it totally will. Yes, we will. We'll talk about that, the 2 different areas of QBS. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So the next slide is a continuation of least restrictive environment. This speaks more to extracurricular activities. We do have special education students who participate in a number of extracurricular activities. And again, the school district looking at the supplementary aids and services to make sure that those students are able to participate with their non-special education or general education peers.
Yeah.
And then for students placed in private institutions, again, we also look at this, and we do have students who do participate in some extracurricular things. And we have IEP meetings. The LEA is me at those meetings. And we look at the student data, their progress, and what types of interests and opportunities that there would be for participation.
So, least restrictive here, I just shared there is the continuum of services that the district currently does have, K through 12. You can see all of those programs, and then the number of those classes. And then really the goal to build capacity, supporting students. We did have the addition of the autistic support program at our middle school level this school year. And then the autism initiative is one of those areas from Patan that we have been working on. We will continue to work, but they support, this school year, they supported all of our autistic support teachers as well as our MDS teacher at the high school with programming and supports. And then the behavior specialist, the BCBA, the 0.5, and then obviously the P to J.
So positive behavior supports, I think throughout the course of the school year, we've talked a lot about the different individuals who are the support personnel. We have Dr. Teller as our full-time behavior specialist. She actually spoke at a meeting when we sort of talked about our de-escalation and our behavior supports. We have the 0.5 BCBA from the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit, 6 registered behavior technicians. We have at least 1 in each building, 2 in one of the buildings. And then we have 3 student assistant counselors. We provide professional development to support all of our behavior initiatives through restorative practices, QBS, the functional behavior assessment, and then, if deemed appropriate, a positive behavior support plan. And then for paraprofessionals, obviously, over the past 2 years that I've been here, and I know it happened prior to me being here, looking at ways that we could provide a variety of opportunities for our paraprofessionals to have professional development, but in this area it's very important. We are and do provide behavior de-escalation strategies and training, and then MTSS and P2G, which we've been sort of talking about throughout the presentation.
The BCBA, that's over at Hereford, right? Isn't that Hereford?
She's right now, she is considered K-12.
Okay.
In all buildings.
The full-time behavior specialist. The part-time BCBA is through the Montgomery County Intermediate.
Okay.
And he is also, both of them, he's here only 0.5, which is half-time, and he
Okay.
is K through 12 as well,
Okay,
for support, and then Dr. Teller is as well.
okay.
She has a caseload of 90 students.
Yeah, I remember that, because she was here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Way
nuts.
too many. I have a quick question. Do you have to be identified as special education to go through a functional behavioral and get a positive behavior support plan?
No, you do not. I don't know if you want to.
No, yeah, so I mentioned that a little
So
bit
you do
earlier,
all that.
and that was the
Yeah.
training and doing a refresher next year. So who actually went through that training first was our K-12 guidance counselors and our K-12 special education teachers. So just really quickly, if you looked at the MTSS process, and for students, if there's areas of concern for behavior, things of that nature, and the data and the supports they put in tier 1 and then in tier 2, it may come to a tier 3 where the data is leading them to, we need to, we agree, we need to move forward and do a functional behavior assessment. They're not a special education student. And so that is where the guidance counselors the expectation they would work to develop and complete the functional behavior assessment, and then if there's behaviors identified of concern, they would then develop the positive behavior support plan. So you don't have to be a special education student to have that need and have that in place.
And then Upper Perkiomen School District programs, we have a student assistance program, restorative practices. We already spoke about second step, which is the social emotional learning. COMCAT, the school-wide positive behavior interventions and support program, which is pro-social behaviors and school-wide
Yeah.
positive behavior support. And then, of course, again, QBS. And then our school-based behavioral health services. These are individuals that are in our building or assigned throughout the district. So we have our guidance counselors, our student assistance counselors, our school psychologists, behavior specialists, and then our contracted school-based counseling.
Any questions on any of that?
No, at least for me, before anybody else jumps in, there's, a lot of that stuff is all obviously tied together, because,
Yes.
we saw, speaking of the BCBA, they were like on like every other slide, so it's kind of all tied together.
Yeah, it's all in conjunction
Yeah.
with each other, working as a team.
Yeah. Anybody else?
So the next remaining slides are the last, I would say probably a pretty critical piece of the special education plan, and it really is personnel development or professional development. There are 7 areas, so you'll see them as we go through them. The highlighted one, obviously, 2 of them, one is autism, one is in positive behavior support. So what the expectation is in the special education plan is in each of these 7 areas, you need to do a minimum of 1 area of professional development in each of the 7 areas. So we literally could do 1 professional development over 3 years. We obviously know and believe that's not enough. So we're listing some of these here, but a lot of them there's a need to continue year after year after year, maybe year every 2 years, and so we look at those areas. So these next slides will be the 7 areas we'll hit on in some of the professional development moving forward. So in autism, obviously you're aware we work with the Autism Initiative through Catan. They support all of our autistic support teachers and currently our MDS teachers. So they come out, they'll do professional development and have for the group, but they will also come by building to individual teachers a minimum of 1 time per month and work with the teacher and the team there, including paraprofessionals as well. So that is consistent every year through the special education plan. And then the intermediate and advanced verbal behavior PD. So we're going to look at over the next year, the following year, and the following year, which will lead into that second special education plan. A lot of our teachers or some of our teachers are ready, or we suspect will be ready, to go to the next step of training in the verbal behavior. And so this is, I think we put in, I input there for next year in the plan, 2 of our autistic support teachers will go to that next level of training. And so we look to do that possibly each year. Positive behavior support, this is, so the safety care QBS training on de-escalation, this is newer. So you know that we have been doing QBS for years. And so people that are certified in QBS, you're required annually to get recertified. Initial certifications may happen sporadically, and they're based on whatever's determined in need. And so they've always been the case. We continue to do that. And so they're offered each year in the plan because sometimes we may have new hires. And so basically if there's a need or a recommendation, it could be an administrator, it could be a teacher. We had, for example, a new autistic support teacher. Well, we do find it important that they are trained and certified. So that would have been a new hire, and that, so we would have planned, and she went through the initial certification. That's just one example. For the QBS on de-escalation, this is new moving forward, and so part of the full QBS training, the first half of the training is all on de-escalation. And so we want K-12, paraprofessionals, general education teachers, administrators, special education teachers, everybody to be trained in that area of de-escalation, because even as parents, wouldn't we all benefit from it if you think of it realistically? So this training over these years of the special education plan, we will every year be working on that. So I believe in 22-23, our K-3 general education, special education teachers, all of our paraprofessionals will get it annually, because there is sometimes new hires, and we just think it's beneficial to go over that. And then the following year, I believe we looked at that year all 4 or 5, general education, special education, and then the following year was middle school, just because it is a lot of staff, and so you can't say let's just do K-5. I mean, you really, you want to break it down into some smaller groups.
Okay, and kind of, it's almost like we're rolling it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it would, I think by the last year of the plan, we actually are back around where we're coming back and we're doing it again for our at the K-3 level, because it is important.
And what grade does it go up to again?
Sorry?
What grade does it go up to again? To go all the way?
Oh, K-12. Yeah, so first year K-3, next year 4 or 5, then the middle, then the high school. And so
Okay.
you see the 5th year would be back at the
Okay.
4 or 5.
Thank you.
Or sorry, K-3.
Okay.
And then we already talked about, I think, but the FBA and PBSP. So I know next year we have the refresher course. We're going to work with the IU to support our staff on that. Any questions on those 2 areas?
So paraprofessional, professional development, we've been talking about QBS, so here it is again, but training on the de-escalation. We have a paraprofessional professional development menu that's available to our paraprofessionals. We typically would offer it during those first 3 days that we're back in session before the school year starts. And literally, it's a menu of professional development opportunities, webinars, articles, other types of trainings and resources for them to access. And it's categorized based on, student, like disability categories of students that they may be supporting. For example, if they're working in an autistic support class, there might be items that are related to autism, executive functioning, students with ADHD, just a variety, mental health. So a variety of different options that they can choose from themselves based on their, how it aligns with what they do in their jobs. And then the frame holder, professional development through Patan, similar sort of idea, webinars and trainings online. And then the science of literacy, so providing opportunities for training on understanding the needs section of a reevaluation report. That really drives the IEP when it's developed, and just understanding how, what's in that piece, what types of interventions could be put in place to support students. And so we have TLS, again, MTSS, multi-tier system of support. We're going to be providing some professional development on Sunday 1 and 2, which is a reading intervention program, and then Wilson certification, because we do have some students who have that as an intervention as a piece.
Do we currently have an employee who's Wilson certified? Didn't we lose them?
I think we still have a few.
Oh, okay.
We do. We have, at some of our buildings, we do. We did, you're correct in that. And so because it is what is being used, so currently those supports are being provided through contracting.
I know that's a really long training.
It is, yeah.
It is, and if you don't have it and it's what you're determined, and hence, like I said, this school year, we've been contracting for that
We've been
particular.
contracting.
Yeah, so we continue to look at staffing to get trained in that, and
So I was just gonna Google it later, but three sentences or less, what is Wilson certification?
so Wilson certification, so I'll just tell you in general, it's a reading intervention, it's gonna support, it's a really, a program that looks at, the phonics piece of things, it looks at decoding, it looks at encoding, it looks at all of those
Literacy.
areas,
Literacy.
yes,
Literacy.
sorry, yeah.
In-depth,
Really,
hardcore
yes,
literacy support.
correct. There's
Okay.
different levels of that. It is, again, for example, the training is a full year of training for the staff member to go
Okay.
through and get certified in that area.
And
All right.
there's a practicum or
Wow.
something, I don't know if it's called a practicum, but there's something along with that where there's work with a student and things like that.
Yeah, over that year, they'll work with a particular student that would fit into basically an identified need.
Wow.
Because it's not just over the training year, yes. And
Okay.
again, not all students would be recommended by any way, shape, or form for Wilson. It really
This
is
is
going to
like,
be
this is
an
like a little
identified
person that
need.
needs a lot of help. Yeah, okay,
Very
cool.
good.
Yeah.
Early literacy.
Sunday 1 and 2 is another reading intervention. Again, they're at different, level 1 is a certain level, typically up to 3rd grade, and then 3rd to 8th is typically Sunday 2, another, in Morton Gillingham type of program, similar in some respects to Wilson. There's not a certification that goes along with that, but that's another program that we implement as well.
Cool, thank you.
These are two more, transition and the IEP development, and I think we talked about before in one of our prior meetings, we had transition was a discussion point. So all of those areas will continue annually, so we work heavily with our IU support. Chris Coberline works with us for our secondary level teachers, grades 6 to 12. We do annually review of IEPs, looking at the areas of transition, and then where we're not involved and we think it's more beneficial and supportive to teachers, Chris will work one-on-one with them in review of some maybe areas to talk about, discuss, show examples to support them.
Awesome.
And then continuing on the understanding of the IEP and then the parent communication as well. And then IEP development is always an area that we work on, and so We typically, an IEP is divided into 8 sections, and it's known, and it goes through those Roman numerals, Roman numeral 1 right through 8. Section 8, the very last section, is that Penn data, which if you look at the area of least restrictive environment, connection there. So we work with the teachers there, and then going through all of those levels. So section 7 and 8 is something we typically, it can be very confusing because they're very similar when you look at a level of support a student needs, but then the last section is where is it happening. So when I mentioned place time, that's that last section, being with typical kids. Face time is different, that's at section 7. That is where your special education teacher, your speech therapist, the minutes in a day that they work with a student. So they're very different, but they are connected. So we always work on that with the teachers because it can be confusing.
Yeah.
And then really the IEP development, if you look in the special ed plan we talk about, so that is obviously any new hires, students, or students, and whether they're a new teacher or whether they're just coming to Upper Kirk from another school district, there are typically, you're compliant and all of those things, but there are different processes and procedures for different districts, so working with those, or if there are any additional teachers that, you know, it's sort of been identified, this would be beneficial, so we recommend and move forward with that. Oops, sorry. And then lastly, the last, the 7th piece of the professional development is our parent professional or engagement sessions that we typically run. So over these years, these are areas that we're looking at to continue doing. And then the one there, preparing for life, fostering relationships, that is the one on the transition that we have done every year. We'll never stop doing it. And that's our transition one for more of our students in low incidence. So the transition from school age, whether it's being a senior or whether it is turning 21, and the transition out. And so that's where typically, if you've ever participated in that, when we used to do them in person, even when we did them on Zoom, we had a lot of the outside agencies come and talk, and we get a lot of our parents to participate in that one. So we do that every year. An autism session, we have a plan for the upcoming year, one of the parent engagement sessions in that area where we will have some teachers included in that one, hoping to develop and have a panel for that. Understanding the IEP is one we're doing, it's our last one.
Well, it's coming up.
It is next Tuesday, our last one of the year, that's a virtual one. That's another one we think we're probably gonna work on that every other year because it's one, a parent may or may not come, but it's a general one on just understanding, because as a parent, you don't need to know anything, but you want to know, obviously, and so it's an opportunity as a group to ask questions, sort of go through that.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's next Tuesday. So you're welcome to join us. And then this one, Hidden High and Hammer. Not sure if you heard of that one. We're still
Sounds
working.
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm thinking we might have a high level. So we're actually going to. Obviously, if you just look at those words, that is, you know, like those are concerns looking in 2022 for kids. So we're working with. We will be planning for over, I think it is the 22-23 school year. It's actually, I believe she is a detective. She works in schools and does, so she will be doing the training here for us. She works with schools, and so that will be that training. More to come on that. Autism parent session, Ben's story. Ever heard of Ben Hartranz? Okay, so.
Second baseman for the Phillies, 1964.
No, but sports is a good thing to bring in. So Ben,
Sports.
Ben works, so if you're familiar with the Philadelphia Eagles, what's their number one thing? It's autism. Ben works with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's one of the representatives, and I think at their home games, he does do something. So we also know Dr. Roach, right? So. But Ben works with them closely. I actually did see Ben on Good Morning Philadelphia. It was probably about 6 weeks ago. Yeah, it was on there. So I have not met Ben in person, but I have spoken to Ben a good couple of times now on the phone. And wait till you meet him. He's amazing. So we're going to look to do over the plan. We're looking to do something with Ben coming into the schools, but it's not a parent thing over the next school year. But there's also the parents and his older brother They also offer sessions. So we are looking, I think it's over the 23-24 school year to have that as one of the sessions. So it's not, there's nothing obviously finalized at that point, but we know that that can happen. So we'll be planning that. And then we have gifted parent session we'll be looking at. And then the executive functioning, students and mental health, over COVID, there was a number of, Andrea set up a number of the 1-hour sessions over COVID, and so there are areas that we'll continue to work on. And then parenting for academic success. We did do that, I believe this fall was one area that we had worked on. And so there are some of them, there may likely be additional ones, but.
Cool.
Did it, Karen?
So questions?
Well done.
If we ask them all.
Well, if you have more, the plan is more obviously comprehensive and will be more detailed of the information that we shared tonight, so.
And that'll be on SharePoint?
The special ed plan she's talking about, well, that's available on,
It's on the website.
similar to the comprehensive
Yep.
plan, because we'll be looking for the approval in June for that as well, because we need to submit in July.
Okay. Anybody? Okay. Rock on. What's next?
PG.
And that stands for?
Come on.
Price to grow. I think we actually had an Allstate thing that was P&G. Pathways to graduation.
Yeah, I should actually.
I cheated.
So path to graduation, we talked about this in the beginning. This is more of just a review of implementation of this school year. So I'll just go over some of the points on where we are, some of the successes. Obviously, path to graduation, again, we did talk about this earlier. You can see there, the overarching goal here is to decrease dropout rates, increase graduation rates for our students. And a large part of the P2G program and the data side of it is 3 areas that they will look at. They typically call them ABC, so it's looking at your daily attendance. A is the attendance, decreasing your offenses, your ODRs or office discipline referrals, or those areas where basically behavior, or the B side of that. And then C is your course performance. So they really zoom in this grant piece to look at the areas of ELA or English language arts, and then in the area of math, and then the course performance. So the goal is to make sure we're seeing continued improvement. So with P2G, we meet monthly throughout the school year with our supports from Patan and the IU as well. We have a core team for P2G. At the middle school, we meet and we pull up our students that are involved in the program, and we look at all of these areas: their attendance, their grades, and then any of the areas of need or behavior. That's the early warning system, is really zooming in and looking at those programs. As part to support the early warning system is the mentor program, which we talked a little bit about if you were in the special ed committee. For that, there was professional development. We did put that out there, looking for teachers, staff, anyone of interest that wanted to be a mentor to a student. And then they went through a training over the school year. And then the Check and Connect program is the program that at Upper Kirk we decided to use. There's different ones you can look at to support kids. The Check and Connect is really with that mentor. The check-in, we like to say typically a minimum of 1 time a week, but a lot of times it might be 2, 3, or 4 times. It could be on a daily basis on the connection that they may develop and just working together with the mentor and the student. So basically, what happened when we started the program in September, we did get some data on these students, and then what happens is Moy and Oi. Moy is the middle of the year, and then
Yeah, that's true. There's a parent book in the hallways.
so Moy is the middle
Sure,
of the
yeah.
year data. So we upload looking at those 3 areas, and then this will be uploaded to the state because it is a program we're using. And then the end of the year upload of data is going to happen in June.
curriculum and students.
Okay, so that data will happen. We haven't had our May meeting yet, and then we'll meet one more time in June, and that's when and we'll upload that data to see where our kids are progressing. So in review of this year, continuing on, and sort of moving forward, we did all year long, we had our monthly meetings with our core team members, reviewing those areas. Over the school year, there has been continued professional development. You can see, so Brian and I have worked as the administrators. We do have, you can continued professional development areas. The internal coach, which we had the plan, and we're still working on that. So Dr. Teller is the internal coach, but we've also, the goal really is for this program would be the emotional support teacher as well. So, and then the family liaison, who is our student assistance counselor at the middle school, has been that. So there's been professional development in those areas. And then to wrap up, when we do meet, we are planning to wrap up the school year. We'll get together as a core team, and our plan really is to have an end of the year event. We did have one in the middle of the year. It was really, I think we all thought, very successful for the kids. It was just a really fun, relaxing time for them. The mentors were there. This was actually the day that they got to really meet the mentor and know that this is who they're going to work with. We're going to plan something just similar for the end of the year with the team. We're also looking, we'll work as a core team to develop a communication to staff, because our goal is not just for these students to participate in the program. This is part of the grant, so there's a requirement of what certain students they can. But the communication is going to go out at the end of this year and the beginning of the year. Again, we want to push this out. We do want to get more staff involved, and we will provide the training to become mentors so that we can, this could be for typical students. This is not a special education thing. This is for kids who need that support. That's the end game, or the end goal really, for this program. And so we'll be looking to do that as well. And then we'll provide an end of the year communication to parents that are participating. Right now, we're making a determination on in the area of social skills, just based on the grant and some things that we can do. And as a core team, we're going to make a determination on a specific curriculum or program for that to support these kids. Our year 2 focus would be really to continue the monthly meetings, continue professional development. Our true goal is really to see if we can get a higher number of mentors of interest. And then they would get professional development in that area, and then we would assign them. We're really hoping on our end that we have other students that may be recommended. They may or may not be a special education student, and then we move forward and supporting them with the program.
So there's no option of having the same mentor?
So the goal is, to me, it makes sense, and I think we're all in agreement. Some of the mentors and some of the students, they're going to stay together.
Okay.
It's not, we're like, no.
I
It's
just
that,
saw a new mentor, identified a new mentor, that was like.
yeah, and so part of the reason for that is because we want to push it out more, and so clearly you would need more mentors. Aside from that, as we had said, if you remember when we were discussing this months back, we had sort of assigned a mentor and a B mentor, and the reason for that was, you never know, it may not be working out for the staff member. They may leave, there may be 1,000,001 reasons. So if that happens, then mentor B would jump into that position. And we have had a couple of individuals that, have not been able or made the decision it's not really going to be the best thing for them. I've also even looking at next year, one individual who is so involved with the program, the mentor side of it, is looking to step down from, because there are so many other areas as a core team member that they're going to focus on. So there's a lot of different reasons that we would maybe do that, but it's not, if it's working.
Yeah, don't mess with
No,
it.
yeah, we need that. Any questions on the B to J?
Yes, ma'am?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
A
No,
lot
that's,
of information.
that's a cool thing that's going on.
So we'll move on to the world of curriculum and instruction, if you could. The first item on our agenda is really just to get your approval for the MOU agreement that we made with the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit for Edgenuity for next school year. We utilize the services of the IU through their Montgomery virtual program for our elementary virtual Eupola students. That's 1st through 5th grade. Now, at this time, we do not intend to open up Eupola at that younger level unless there is a special circumstance that might warrant the child going to Eupola. And of course, that would be on administrative recommendation. But we did, on the chance that we would need to utilize their services, want to approve this MOU with the IU. So we're looking for your blessing on that. So we don't pay anything out front unless we use the service.
Fantastic.
Yep, so we pay per student and only based on usage. So this is just on the chance that we need them, we would like to have this in place.
Any questions?
I know there's no cost on here, but is there a breakdown somewhere of what the
Yeah, they are,
for certain services?
I want to say the number is $3,700 per semester per student. So that covers the licenses, that covers access to their workbooks, that covers the instruction, the teacher as well. So
Pretty much the same price it was this year, or is it more?
yeah, it's the same price. It's the
Same
same
price.
price as the school year. Yep, so we just go through the IU for their services. So like I said, at this point, we don't necessarily have anybody at the CADA, 1 to 5 level that we're using it, but if we do, we want to make sure this is in place.
Sure.
Motion?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Awesome.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Great. So the next thing we're looking for is also for approval to extend our TLS, our Teaching, Learning, and Succeeding contract for next school year. If you remember, TLS is the professional development program that we utilize with cohorts of teachers at 4-5, 6-8, and then at the high school. So we are going to be, there's going to be kind of 2 parts of TLS this year. They will be working with our cohort 1 teachers on some instructional coaching in the classroom to extend their learning from this school year. And then we will be bringing in another cohort of teachers at the secondary level for them to get trained as well. This will not exceed $105,000, but this is our contract that we will be working with that company and group. They've done a wonderful job. We've had tremendous feedback from our teachers and our kids this year, and so we're very excited to extend that professional development to a new group and also on the learning that's already occurred.
I was gonna ask about feedback, so that was.
Oh, they love it. Yeah, the power slide, if you're ever talking to one of our teachers, ask them about power slide, their faces are gonna light up. Essentially, it's just a PowerPoint slide that kind of encapsulates the whole lesson. It shows the lesson objectives, the outcomes, it's very student focused, it kind of keeps the teacher focused on their instruction, the students focused on their learning. And so if you go into any classroom, 4 to 12, with the teachers who have learned this, they all talk about these power slides. So it's been a really, really excellent addition to our professional development portfolio.
So how long have we been using them?
Just this school year, this is our first year with them.
Okay, so this will be year 2 then.
Yeah, so the entire 4-5 building was trained this year, just based on their numbers. So next year will be their year 2 with instructional coaching, and then we had a cohort at the middle school and a cohort at the high school. So those cohorts, middle and high school, will get that coaching, and then we'll bring in new cohorts and teachers as well.
So, how many years do you believe it'll be, like how many cohorts are you gonna need before everybody has received the training who needs it?
I think we'll probably need an additional year because we haven't taken this down K-3 yet. I think we're gonna get, if I remember correctly of our notes, we're gonna get everybody middle school and high school this coming year, they'll be done. And then we'll move down to the K-3 level as well.
For 23, 24?
Mhm.
Okay.
Gosh, 23, that's crazy. Yeah. And what they're teaching our teachers, the differentiated instruction strategies that they're teaching our teachers mesh very nicely with what we're working on with them with our MTSS training and our flow chart. So it all kind of comes together really, really nicely, and so it's been a nice marriage between them. And it's general education and special education teachers. So many of the groups at the middle school and the high school are in a co-teaching model where the gen ed and the special ed teacher are working together and receiving the same training. So it's really been a profound impact on our staff.
Considering all that we talked about earlier about the least restrictive environments and stuff like that, it would seem to make sense that there is synergy between all that, right?
Yeah, and even the conversations our teachers are having, many of you know I'm a parent in the district as well, and when I have conversations with my own daughter's teacher, she's talking to me about the ways in which she's differentiating instruction for her kids. And it's the language they're learning in TLS. And so as an administrator in the district, I'm like, oh, this is wonderful, this is what we want. But as a parent too, the lens is, you know my child,
Yeah.
you're programming for my child, and my child's getting what she needs. And that's what TLS is really bringing into the classroom.
Okay, so it's a lot about differentiating.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
If you had to say one word, what is TLS?
differentiation.
Okay.
100%. Meeting the kids where they are and bringing them up to the expectation of where they need to be with appropriate supports.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
awesome.
Do you know how much we spent on it last year?
I don't have that number. I do believe it's very similar to what's here. We will not exceed 105 this year, so upcoming into 22, 23. I believe the cost is very similar.
Just kind of a silly question. How much materials do the teachers have from this program? If you look at the terms that they have there, they say if we, all the materials remain the property of TLS, and if we don't re-up with them, what are they gonna do? Come in school and take the pamphlets, take the...
No, so they have two things. So we have our own Upper Perk specific website.
Okay.
And what's on that website is video examples of the strategies they're learning, graphic organizers that they might be using in the classrooms, templates, some of the proprietary stuff that TLS makes. The other thing that's on that website, which is very nice, is a toolkit for administrators. So when they're going into the classroom, they now have look-fors for what the teachers are learning in TLS. So as an administrator, I can go in and say, oh, well, I know in TLS they were learning about instructional scaffolds in math, I don't know. And so I can pull up the look-for, so when I'm walking through classrooms, I can check off whether or not I'm seeing those things. So that's the DI strategy toolkit, and it is an Upper Perk specific website based on our training solely. There's videos of our teachers doing those strategies so the other cohorts can see. So it's all digital. There's no pamphlets.
It just made me laugh when I read that.
So they just go,
Yeah, pull it out.
Any other questions? Do I have a motion?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, on the next page, we have our list of curriculum writers for 22-23. You will see that this list is very science heavy. We are in the science phase of our curriculum review, and the state of Pennsylvania is transitioning to the new PA science standards, which are aligned with the NGSS, another acronym for you, which are the next generation science standards. They were officially adopted by PDE, which is very exciting. For us curriculum people, we think it's pretty cool. So there is going to be a lot of investment in time and learning along with the curriculum writing, because our teachers need to learn a whole new set of standards. So you'll see, like I said, our list is very science heavy this year due to the new adoption of those standards. So we're looking to have that list it's our tentative list for now, but that's what we're looking for approval, moving into 22-23 curriculum writing. Also the AP Spanish class, Kim talked about at our last meeting, that's going to be a new addition coming into our course catalog next school year.
Everything underneath Science 8, that's all high school?
Yes, yep.
Any other questions? Motion?
I'll motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
So the last thing for me, we're seeking approval for the mentor compensations for this school year. We have 19 mentors who mentored 21 new teachers. You will see that there are some of our mentors had multiple mentees based on staffing and building needs and things like that. So we had a 21 teacher induction class that ranged everywhere from our kindergarten teachers to school counselors and everything in between. So we had a really nice group this year of inductees. So this would be the compensation for our mentors. We couldn't have an induction program without those folks. They really do a nice job getting our new teachers acclimated.
And there's some great names on it.
Oh yeah, yeah. We have a really great pool of mentors, and they do a nice job. So
Why do some get $250 and some get $5?
250 is if the teacher was only here a half year. So some that come in after January would only do the half year of induction. And then, so like Beth would have the other 250 next school year, the teacher will complete the second half of induction next
Gotcha.
school year.
Thank you.
I was doing the math earlier, so like.
Is it right? Oh my gosh, I checked it.
I
It's
think
not.
it's 10,000.
It probably is. So Dr. Roach has a joke that I do Sarah math, and it's probably 10,000. I will fix that number. I checked it 3
The number I had
times.
on my bid, on the third bid, I had 5,050.
Oh no, that got fixed and updated because I added some extra names.
Maybe I should scroll
And
up.
just a plug, just scroll up, get rid of that.
How's that?
Just a plug for induction. Please keep a lookout, board members, on your email, probably early August. Maybe late July, we'll see how on the ball I am. We do have a 3-day new teacher induction training series. I can give you those tentative dates right now. The first day, and Mr. Elliott is always there because we serve lunch.
Yeah.
The first day, we like to have as many board members as possible come just to meet our new teachers, say hello, welcome them. It's really nice to see their bright and excited faces, and then we give you lunch too. So just be on the lookout for those dates. I can give them to you now tentatively. It's going to be August 16th, 17th, and 18th is our new teacher induction week. So we're going with August 16th will be our board day. But they like to see, they like to meet everybody and, fresh faces coming into the district. So just a little plug for my induction program.
August.
Yep, Paula always puts on a good spread.
I
for
know
us.
she does.
Always a good spread. So we'd love to have you. Just keep an eye on your email. I'll send you more information as it gets a little bit closer.
Plus it's kind of cool. Yeah,
It's nice to see the newbies, yeah, it is.
That's what it says to work for a school, because I'm always,
Oh,
I'm always at our new teacher induction stuff.
Well, if you want us to save you a plate, we will. I'll always order orders. That's usually the Panera day. So anyway, just a plug for our induction program. And I'll fix the number. I did Sarah math, you all. Oh, and one other thing, really quickly. I know there was some emails going back and forth about some future ready growth data that came out from PDE that came out last week. It's fresh off the presses. We're currently processing through that. If you saw it and you have any burning questions about it, we will share it with our back to school data. Usually that presentation is like late September or October. So if you're excited about the future ready growth data, so are we. We're just processing through it now. So those are the updates from the world of curriculum and instruction.
Any questions on the processing mentor pay? I know we are a little more official here, so do I have a first?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Yes, thank you very much. Our mentors will be very appreciative, and we're thankful for them as well.
We are appreciative of them.
Yes, they do a nice
That's
job.
what Judy would say. Okay, so you guys are done your stuff.
Yeah.
Any of you guys have any questions? Judy? Audience? Hi.
Hi, I was told to come to the curriculum. I have questions about, my son is currently attending Faith Christian,
Okay.
and he was just accepted to the Western Center. So we're really excited about that.
Cool, congratulations.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We love the Western Zone.
So do we. Many friends went through there. So my question though, when I filled out the application,
And don't say any names.
no, I filled out the application, I checked the box where it says going, live in Upper Kirk District, private school, and then I saw the option for the homeschooling, and I wanted to know, do you offer homeschooling with the tech, with the Western Center? If he was deciding to change that route, because he also is looking into going into an apprenticeship.
So the homeschooling applications and information would go through Robin Rosenberger. She's in our curriculum and instruction office, and she can give you all the specifics on that. But also, if he's interested in virtual learning, we do have Eupola as well, but that would be a conversation we have to have because typically Western Center kids, we ask them to be face-to-face if they're going to, in face-to-face instruction, if they're going to go to the Western Center as well. But any questions about homeschooling would go through Robin, and I can give you her email address when we wrap up here. I'll write it down for you, and she can answer all those questions for you.
I think I actually understand her question
Yeah, there's
better.
a basic question.
Her question is actually, does our policy currently allow for homeschoolers to go to the Western Center? Because
That's your question.
Are you the one who I emailed with? Or are you, because, okay, because
But
I actually had
has
this
been
question from.
some questions about it, so, and also
And our policy is
charter,
not.
Yeah.
and also the Eupola. Do you offer those 3 categories?
We do offer virtual learning through Eupola, but we, for Western Center students, we do ask that they come to the building face-to-face for classes to then be transported to the Western Center. As far as homeschooling, I do know there was some change to PDE policy like in the last 2 years.
I believe you can also check on the website,
Yeah.
and there'll be information on that, but as she has shared, any applications or any specific questions in regard to homeschooling would go through, it's the
Robin.
Pupil Services Department, but to the attention of Robin, who
Yeah,
works
they
in
did make some
PDE.
changes to the policy through PDE. I believe it was like right in the middle of COVID. It was like the 1920 school year. So I'd have to go back and look at the past.
1920?
There it is, 2019, 2020 school year. And so we'd have to go back and check that policy and see exactly what our wording is. I've never had a homeschool family do the Western Center, so I would just need to check the wording on our policy just to make sure I'm giving you the most accurate information.
But we can help translate this stuff.
100%, yeah,
Right?
yeah. So if you give me your contact information, I can
We'll get
coordinate the
somebody to you.
homeschool thing through Robin, but also get you the exact information through our policy.
We can follow up with you.
Yeah,
Yeah, to share the information rather than
Gets
have to,
kinda
who's
crazy,
this
isn't it?
person?
Trying to
Yeah,
figure out the
yeah.
paths.
we can share some information after the meeting, contact information. Yeah,
Thank you.
of course.
Cool? Yep, okay, sweet. All right, anything else? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn then.
Motion.
Do I have a second? Discussion? Oh, the screen's shutting off, must be time. All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Have a good summer. We'll see you
Motion
guys in
carries.
September.
All right, we are
Boy,
adjourned.
that's exciting, that's the first one.
Thank you guys, thank you for all this stuff.
Good to see you.
Yeah.